The sterile hum of Unity General Hospital, a familiar symphony of low voices, rolling carts, and distant PA announcements, shattered without warning. A guttural groan, deep beneath the building, preceded a series of violent electrical surges that rippled through the fluorescent lights, making them flicker and die in rapid succession. An acrid, chemical smell, distinct from the usual antiseptic tang, began to permeate the warm, humid air. A faint wisp at first, then thickening with alarming speed. Panic, a subtle tremor just moments ago, now began to pulse through the crowded corridors, a primal fear seizing the waiting patients and their families. The cheerful artwork on the walls, once a comforting distraction, seemed to mock the growing chaos, its vibrant colors momentarily lost in the dimming light as the emergency generators struggled to engage. A piercing, discordant wail erupted from the fire alarm system, not the crisp, authoritative blast one expected, but a strained, intermittent shriek that hinted at its own imminent failure. Simultaneously, a thick, greasy black smoke began to billow from the vents and service stairwells, rapidly obscuring the already dim passageways, clinging to the air with a suffocating weight. The previously packed corridors, moments ago a slow-moving river of humanity, transformed into a churning, panicked sea. Shouts of fire mingled with terrified screams, a cacophony of fear that drowned out the frantic instructions of overwhelmed hospital staff. The scent of burning plastic and synthetic materials replaced the mundane hospital odors, a terrifying perfume of destruction. In the bustling pediatric waiting room, Ethan, 13, felt the shift acutely from his wheelchair. His vivid eyes, usually absorbing every minute detail of his surroundings, now struggled to penetrate the rapidly thickening haze. The vibrations of the floor, previously a subtle undercurrent of hospital life, intensified into a jarring tremor, echoing the frantic pounding of his own heart. He heard the distinct, high-pitched cries of younger children, a sound that twisted his gut, followed by the deeper, desperate pleas of their parents. The familiar layout of the room, etched with photographic clarity in his mind, began to blur at the edges. The vibrant animal murals on the wall, now just dark, indistinct shapes swallowed by the encroaching smoke, trapping him in a nightmare. The primary evacuation routes, clearly marked on the emergency maps that few ever truly studied, quickly became impassable. Nurses, doctors, and orderlies, their faces etched with despair, desperately tried to guide the surging crowd, but the smoke was too dense, the panic too pervasive. Doors that should have opened automatically remained stubbornly shut, while others were jammed by the sheer press of bodies, creating dangerous bottlenecks. The once clear paths to safety were now labyrinthine traps, filled with debris and disoriented individuals. Ethan watched, his mind racing as the chaos escalated. His precise internal map of the hospital, usually a source of comfort and control, now felt like a cruel taunt, a secret knowledge trapped within his silent observations, unable to be shared. Chief of Security Miller, a man whose imposing frame usually commanded order, now barked ineffectual commands into a crackling radio, his face a mask of frustration and growing alarm. He shoved past a cluster of disoriented visitors, his eyes darting wildly, oblivious to the small figure in the wheelchair trying to gain his attention. For Miller, every disabled person was merely an added complication in an already impossible situation, an obstacle to be circumvented, not a potential asset. The air grew hotter, a tangible, suffocating weight that pressed down on lungs and minds alike, intensifying the sense of entrapment and the desperate need for an exit, any exit, from the escalating inferno. A sudden, violent whoosh of air, accompanied by a shower of sparks, indicated a new, terrifying development. Flames, vibrant orange and red, licked greedily at the ceiling tiles in the far corner of the waiting room, their heat radiating outwards with an alarming intensity. The acrid smoke now stung Ethan's eyes, making them water uncontrollably, yet he blinked it away, his gaze fixed on the escalating horror. The distant wail of sirens, once a comforting promise of rescue, now sounded tragically far away, muffled by the roar of the fire and the rising tide of human despair. The last remaining emergency lights flickered, blinked, and then died completely, plunging the wing into an oppressive, terrifying darkness, broken only by the hungry glow of the advancing flames, promising to consume everything. Ethan's world, a mosaic of precise details and subtle vibrations, usually began with the familiar rumble of the CTA-L train from his south side window, a comforting tremor that promised another day of observation. His small apartment, meticulously organized by his mother, was a sanctuary of quiet order, each object holding a specific place in his mind's detailed inventory. He navigated its familiar contours with practiced ease, his wheelchair a seamless extension of his will, gliding over worn floorboards that hummed with the building's ancient rhythms. Every morning the scent of his mother's strong coffee mingled with the faint metallic tang of the city air, drifting through the open window, a sensory anchor before he meticulously prepared for his hospital visits, which were as much a routine as they were a necessity. His communication transcended spoken words, relying instead on a formidable intellect that processed information at an astonishing speed. Ethan's vivid eyes, a window to his hyper-perceptive mind, absorbed every minute architectural detail, every subtle shift in light, every pedestrian's unique gait, transforming the world into a vast, intricate diagram. From his wheelchair, he had cultivated an extraordinary spatial awareness, mapping the labyrinthine corridors of Unity General Hospital not just as physical spaces, but as a series of interconnected data points, each turn and door meticulously filed away. This internal blueprint, richer and more precise than any official schematic, was his unique language, a silent symphony of spatial relationships only he could truly hear. Beneath his quiet exterior, Ethan harbored a profound desire to contribute, to be seen not as a patient, but as an active participant in the complex dance of life. He dreamed of a world where his mind, unburdened by physical limitations, could unlock secrets, solve puzzles, and guide others through unseen pathways. His worldview was shaped by the constant interplay of observation and memory. He perceived the overlooked, the minute deviations from the norm, finding beauty and logic in patterns invisible to the hurried world. This intrinsic motivation, a quiet fire within him, fueled his endless curiosity about how things worked, how spaces connected, and how seemingly disparate elements formed a cohesive whole. His most cherished habit, a small worn Chicago Bears cap pulled low over his dark, disheveled hair, served as both a comfort object and a symbolic shield, allowing him to retreat into his internal world of intricate maps and precise calculations. It was during these moments, cap-clad and seemingly lost in thought, that his mind would race, connecting corridors, calculating distances, and mentally sketching evacuation routes for every building he entered. He felt a deep unspoken empathy for those who seemed lost or confused, recognizing their disoriented movements as a mirror of his own physical constraints, yet knowing he possessed a mental compass that could, perhaps, guide them. Unity, General Hospital, a place of needles and hushed voices for most, was for Ethan a living, breathing blueprint, an ever-evolving puzzle he delighted in solving. Every visit, from the bustling lobby to the quiet, forgotten service stairwells, was an opportunity to update his mental archive, noting newly placed signs, subtle changes in floor patterns, or the precise location of a rarely used emergency exit. Nurse Olivia Davis, with her steady hands and compassionate gaze, was the only one who truly recognized the depth of his observational skills, often pausing to acknowledge his quiet insights, unknowingly affirming the extraordinary power of his unique perception. Now, as the acrid smoke thickened and the hospital plunged into darkness, the very details Ethan had so meticulously catalogued, those quiet internal maps, began to flicker into sharp, terrifying clarity. The roar of the fire was a monstrous sound, yet through it, his mind raced, overlaying the chaos with the precise three-dimensional blueprint of the building he held captive in his memory. Every hidden corridor, every rarely used fire exit, every service elevator, usually just silent data points in his mind, now screamed with an urgent, life-saving purpose, transforming his quiet talent into the only beacon in the escalating inferno. Nurse Olivia Davis, her usually composed face now etched with a subtle line of concern, knelt beside Ethan's wheelchair, her steady hands instinctively resting on his arm. The acrid smoke stung her nostrils, but her gaze remained fixed on the boy's unusually intense eyes. She had seen that look before, a silent, rapid processing of information that far surpassed her own. "Ethan, are you all right?" she asked, her voice a soothing balm against the rising tide of panic. She knew better than to expect a verbal response, instead watching for the subtle shifts in his posture, the slight tilt of his head that indicated deep thought. She trusted his unique way of seeing the world, a trust forged over many quiet appointments, recognizing the profound intelligence simmering beneath his quiet exterior, a stark contrast to the unfolding pandemonium around them. Chief of Security Miller, a man built like a reinforced door, bellowed commands into a walkie-talkie that crackled with static, his face a mask of furious concentration. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, now darted wildly, seeking order in the overwhelming chaos. He barked at a group of disoriented visitors, shoving past them with a brusque urgency that bordered on aggression. As he moved, his gaze swept over Ethan, an instantaneous assessment of obstacle clicking into place. To Miller, the boy in the wheelchair was not a potential source of insight, but an inconvenient impediment, another body to be moved, another complication in a crisis that demanded rigid adherence to established, now failing protocols. His mind, trained for drills and predictable emergencies, utterly failed to register the quiet intelligence radiating from Ethan's intense, observing eyes. Across the rapidly darkening pediatric waiting room, Dr. Alex Chen, a young intern whose usual crisp demeanor was now frayed at the edges, stumbled backward as a surge of frantic parents pushed past him. His initially skeptical expression morphed into one of genuine alarm as the smoke thickened, making his eyes water and his throat constrict. He had been trying to usher a small group towards an exit he believed to be clear, only to find it jammed, a fresh wave of panic washing over him. He caught a glimpse of Nurse Davis, a familiar figure of calm kneeling by a wheelchair-bound boy, their quiet exchange a stark contrast to the escalating bedlam. He dismissed it as a momentary comfort, his medical training focused on immediate physical threats, not the subtle dynamics of human perception. As the ceiling tiles crackled and popped above them, Nurse Davis, her voice rising slightly to be heard above the growing roar, tried to flag down Chief Miller. "Chief, Ethan knows this hospital. He sees things, he remembers every detail, he could guide us," she pleaded, her hand extended towards the boy. Miller, however, merely spared her a dismissive glance, his gaze already sweeping past them to the next perceived bottleneck. "Nurse, there's no time for special cases. Stick to the emergency protocols. We need clear paths, not child's play," he retorted, his words clipped, his tone laced with a paternalistic impatience that entirely negated Olivia's desperate plea. His rigid adherence to procedure blinded him to the unique asset right before his eyes, dismissing valuable insight as mere distraction. Dr. Chen, now struggling to breathe in the smoke-choked air, watched as a group of orderlies futilely attempted to pry open a fire door, their grunts of effort lost in the rising clamor. The official evacuation routes were clearly failing, and the sense of desperate futility was palpable. He saw Ethan, despite the chaos, calmly pointing a finger towards a seldom-used service corridor, his eyes sharp and focused, almost as if he were seeing through the walls. A flicker of curiosity, quickly suppressed by the urgency of the moment, crossed Chen's face. He had been taught to trust established systems, but the systems were crumbling, and the boy's unwavering certainty, even in this inferno, was a quiet, unsettling anomaly. The air grew thick with the smell of burning plastic and synthetic fabrics, pressing down with a suffocating weight. Chief Miller, his face streaked with soot, found himself cornered near the jammed fire door, his radio now dead, his voice hoarse from shouting. Nurse Davis, her arm protectively around Ethan's wheelchair, felt the intense heat radiating from the ceiling above, the last emergency lights having flickered out, plunging them into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the hungry advancing flames. Dr. Chen, coughing violently, stumbled back towards them, realizing the futility of his own efforts. All three, the rigid chief, the compassionate nurse, and the skeptical doctor, were now trapped together, the roar of the fire a terrifying symphony, their faces illuminated by the orange glow, facing an insurmountable challenge that demanded a solution beyond any protocol they knew. The hospital's internal structure began to groan under the assault, a terrifying symphony of splitting wood and twisting metal. Overhead, the sprinkler system, designed for localized fires, sputtered erratically before failing completely, sending only a few despairing drips onto the sizzling floor. The acrid smoke, now a choking, impenetrable curtain, reduced visibility to mere inches, forcing panicked parents to crawl, dragging their children through the oppressive haze. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of fear and the sweet, cloying scent of burning insulation, making every breath a painful, desperate gasp. The distant wail of fire trucks, once a beacon of hope, now seemed to fade into the roaring inferno, a cruel reminder of their isolation. Ethan, his lungs burning, instinctively pressed a hand to his chest, the vibrations of the collapsing building reverberating through his wheelchair, a horrifying echo of the chaos consuming them. Chief Miller, his face a grim mask of soot and sweat, stumbled back from the jammed fire door, his radio now a useless piece of plastic, emitting only a deathly silence. His booming voice, usually a force of order, was reduced to a hoarse whisper as he coughed violently, his eyes darting frantically in the dim, smoke-choked light. "This is a disaster. We're cut off," he rasped, his desperation turning into aggression as he glared at Nurse Davis and Ethan. "Protocols are useless. We should have never let this many people gather. This boy is just another mouth to feed, another body to drag." His prejudice, amplified by panic, blinded him completely to Ethan's unwavering focus, dismissing the boy's silent, intense observation as mere childlike helplessness, a dangerous and fatal miscalculation. Dr. Chen, his medical training screaming at him to find a viable exit, found himself pressed against a cold, grimy wall, his vision blurred by tears and smoke. He watched as a young mother frantically searched for her child in the swirling blackness, her choked sobs a testament to the escalating horror. The conventional escape routes were clearly compromised, a labyrinth of choked passages and impassable debris, and the stark reality of their entrapment began to settle in. He glanced at Ethan, who, despite the surrounding pandemonium, remained eerily calm, his eyes fixed on some unseen point, his fingers subtly tracing patterns on his armrest. A sliver of doubt pierced Chen's rigid skepticism. The boy's composure was an anomaly, a quiet challenge to every logical assumption he held. "Chief, listen to me. Ethan knows this place better than anyone," Nurse Davis insisted, her voice tight with urgency, pulling Miller's arm to force his attention. "He's been mapping this hospital for years. He knows every shortcut, every hidden passage. He could get us out." Miller violently shook her off, his eyes flashing with frustrated fury. "Are you insane, nurse? Trust a child in a wheelchair in this inferno? We need real solutions, not fantasies. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. There's no time for this foolishness." His outright dismissal, laced with a paternalistic contempt, was a slap in the face not just to Olivia, but to the very concept of unconventional intelligence, sealing their fate if his tunnel vision prevailed. A sudden deafening crack echoed through the pediatric wing, followed by a shower of plaster and sparks as a section of the ceiling directly above them buckled, revealing angry, flickering flames licking at the exposed conduits. The heat intensified, a searing wave that pressed against their faces, making the air shimmer with oppressive density. A cascade of broken light fixtures and shattered glass rained down, narrowly missing Ethan's head. Panic surged anew amongst the small cluster of trapped survivors, their desperate cries swallowed by the roaring blaze. The path they had just considered, a seemingly clear service corridor, was now blocked by a fallen ventilation duct, effectively cutting off their last visible retreat, trapping them in a fiery crucible. Chief Miller, defeated and coughing, slumped against the now glowing wall, his face etched with despair, the last vestiges of his authority crumbling. Dr. Chen, his medical bag discarded, watched in horror as the flames advanced, realizing the futility of any conventional escape. Nurse Davis, holding Ethan's hand, felt the boy's small fingers squeeze hers with surprising strength. Through the choking smoke, Ethan's vivid eyes, reflecting the orange glow of the inferno, darted towards a section of the wall that seemed unremarkable to everyone else, a faded mural of whimsical animals. He pointed with a precise, unwavering finger, then made a series of rapid, intricate gestures, his silent communication a desperate plea for them to see what only he could. Was there truly a hidden path, or was it just a child's desperate delusion in the face of certain doom? The chief, ignoring Ethan's silent plea, braced his formidable shoulder against the stubborn fire door, the metal hot beneath his touch, a searing testament to the inferno raging beyond. He grunted with effort, sweat mingling with soot on his brow, his muscles straining against the unyielding barrier. The air, thick with the smell of burning synthetics and the acrid tang of despair, pressed down on them, making every breath a shallow, painful gasp. Other trapped patients and their families, their faces ghostly in the flickering orange light, watched with bated breath, their hopes pinned on his brute force. But the door remained stubbornly jammed, a monument to their entrapment, its steel frame warped by the intense heat. Frustration rippled through the small, desperate crowd, a collective sigh of defeat that was almost as suffocating as the smoke itself. Ethan, from his wheelchair, observed Miller's futile efforts, his gaze unwavering, processing the sheer inefficiency of relying solely on physical might against the overwhelming force of the fire. Dr. Chen, fueled by a surge of desperate adrenaline, abandoned his attempts at the fire door and spun around, his eyes darting through the swirling smoke, searching for any other viable escape route. He spotted a dimly lit service corridor, usually reserved for staff, and pointed, shouting, "This way, there might be a maintenance exit." A small group of families, their hope momentarily rekindled, stumbled after him, coughing and clutching their children close. But their progress was abruptly halted by a tangled mass of fallen ventilation ducts and twisted electrical conduits that had crashed down from the ceiling, effectively sealing off the passage. The metallic tang of burnt wiring hung heavy in the air, mixing with the sharp scent of plaster dust. A collective groan of dismay erupted, quickly stifled by hacking coughs. Chen slammed his fist against a nearby wall in impotent fury, his earlier skepticism about Ethan replaced by a raw, personal despair. Ethan watched, his mind silently charting the impossibility of that path, confirming his own internal calculations about its compromised status. Chief Miller, his face a mask of furious desperation, stumbled back towards Nurse Davis, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot from the smoke. "It's useless. Every route is blocked," he rasped, his voice hoarse and raw. He caught sight of Ethan, who was now subtly pointing towards the faded animal mural again, his gaze intense. "Nurse, for God's sake, stop with the child's games. This is not the time for fantasy. We are talking about lives here, not some whimsical drawing." Miller snarled, his words laced with a cutting contempt that stung Olivia more than the smoke. His prejudice, a rigid wall built from years of ingrained protocols, prevented him from seeing anything beyond Ethan's wheelchair, dismissing the boy's silent, insistent gestures as a mere distraction, a childish delusion in the face of very adult, very real death. He refused to acknowledge the quiet intelligence radiating from Ethan, convinced that only his own, now failing methods held any semblance of truth. Nurse Davis, her own lungs burning, gripped Miller's arm, her voice rising in urgency. "Chief, you're not listening. Ethan has an eidetic memory. He's been here countless times. He knows every inch of this hospital. He's showing us a way. Don't you see his focus? He's not playing." Her pleas, however, were lost in the escalating cacophony of crackling flames and terrified whispers. Other trapped individuals, their faces streaked with soot and tears, glanced at Ethan and Olivia, their eyes reflecting a mix of pity and disbelief. A child in a wheelchair, leading them through an inferno. It seemed like a cruel joke, a desperate attempt to grasp at straws. The air grew heavier, the heat more intense, and the sheer futility of their situation began to settle into their bones, a chilling realization that time was rapidly running out, and conventional wisdom had utterly failed them. Ethan, meanwhile, remained a silent observer, his eyes scanning the scene, confirming the collective despair and the ultimate failure of their current strategies. A sudden violent tremor shook the entire pediatric wing, a deep guttural groan from the building's very foundations. Directly above them, a section of the ceiling, weakened by the relentless heat, groaned ominously, then buckled inward with a terrifying crash. A shower of sparks and flaming debris rained down, narrowly missing the huddled group, forcing them to cower and shield their heads. The flames, now a hungry, roaring beast, licked greedily at the exposed wiring and insulation, spreading with alarming speed, cutting off the last sliver of hope they had entertained for a retreat. The smell of burning plastic intensified, a suffocating chemical odor that clawed at their throats. The heat was now unbearable, a tangible, oppressive weight that pressed down on their skin, making their clothes feel like an oven. The area they occupied, once a waiting room, was rapidly shrinking, becoming a fiery crucible from which escape seemed increasingly impossible. The roar of the advancing fire, a monstrous symphony of destruction, filled the air, drowning out all but the most desperate cries. Chief Miller, defeated, slumped against a wall, coughing uncontrollably, his last shred of authority consumed by the flames. Dr. Chen, his face pale with terror, stared blankly at the encroaching inferno, his medical knowledge useless against such overwhelming force. Nurse Davis, her arm still protectively around Ethan's wheelchair, felt the boy's small hand begin to tap a rapid, rhythmic pattern on his armrest, a silent language only she had come to recognize as intense concentration. Through the smoke and flickering orange light, Ethan's vivid eyes, reflecting the fiery glow, darted from the now-collapsed ceiling to the faded animal mural, then to a specific, almost imperceptible seam in the wall, a detail only he would have noticed. His mind raced, a silent whirlwind of architectural blueprints and spatial calculations, connecting overlooked pathways, revealing a hidden possibility. The air grew hotter, the smoke thicker, but in Ethan's mind a new, desperate route was forming, a sliver of hope in the heart of the inferno, if only they would listen. The oppressive heat, now a tangible entity, pressed down on the huddle of trapped survivors, their clothes clinging uncomfortably to sweat-soaked skin as the air shimmered with the inferno's fury. The acrid smoke, a suffocating shroud, clawed at their throats, making every breath a burning effort, and the once familiar hospital wing was now a distorted, fiery cavern. The desperate, guttural cries of those still searching for loved ones echoed through the haze, a haunting symphony of despair. Chief Miller, his face a grim tableau of defeat, coughed racketly, the last vestiges of his authority dissolving into the chaos, his eyes reflecting the hungry, orange glow of the advancing flames. Dr. Chen, his medical bag forgotten, stared at the encroaching fire, his mind reeling from the futility of his training against such overwhelming destruction. The conventional paths were choked, the protocols useless, leaving them utterly isolated, their hope dwindling to a mere ember in the escalating blaze. Chief Miller, his voice a raw, smoke-choked rasp, turned on Nurse Davis, his eyes blazing with a desperate, frustrated fury. "This is madness, Nurse. We don't have time for a child's games. His memory maps are useless against a real fire. We need a way out, not some fanciful delusion." His words, laced with a cutting contempt, echoed the disbelief of the small, terrified cluster of patients and their families, whose gazes flickered between the desperate nurse and the quiet boy in the wheelchair. Dr. Chen, though his own methods had failed, still hesitated, his scientific mind struggling to reconcile the boy's composure with the impossible reality, his ingrained skepticism a stubborn barrier against the unconventional. The collective despair was a palpable weight pressing down on Ethan, whose silent efforts seemed to be met only with scorn and dismissal, a heavy burden for his young shoulders. Ethan, despite the inferno's terrifying roar and the crushing weight of the adult's despair and disbelief, felt a flicker of doubt, a surge of profound insecurity in his young heart. The sheer enormity of the responsibility, the lives hanging in the balance, pressed down on him with suffocating force, threatening to overwhelm the meticulous maps in his mind. He was just a boy, small and confined to his chair, and their eyes, filled with fear and skepticism, were a tangible barrier, making his silent attempts to communicate feel futile, like whispers lost in a hurricane. His usual calm facade wavered, the constant stream of sensory input, the burning plastic, the desperate cries, the vibrations of the crumbling structure, a cacophony threatening to drown out the precise, internal logic of his mental blueprint. He hesitated, his small hand still tapping, but the rhythm faltered, his gaze briefly dropping to his lap. Nurse Davis, sensing Ethan's momentary retreat, knelt beside his wheelchair, her hand gently but firmly covering his, her compassionate gaze locking with his intense eyes. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos, cutting through the smoke and despair. "You know this place. You see things no one else does. Remember what we talked about. Your mind is your greatest strength. They need you. I trust you. Show them." Her words, a lifeline of unwavering belief, were a quiet balm against the overwhelming pressure, a powerful reaffirmation of his unique gift. She squeezed his hand, a silent pact of understanding between them, pushing aside Chief Miller's furious glares and the disbelieving stares of the trapped group, knowing that this quiet boy held the key to their survival, a truth she would fiercely defend. Galvanized by Olivia's unwavering trust, Ethan's gaze sharpened, the momentary hesitation dissolving into intense focus. His small hand, previously tapping on his armrest, now rose with newfound purpose, pointing with an unwavering certainty towards the faded animal mural that adorned the far wall, a section that seemed unremarkable to the panicked eyes of the adults. He then extended his finger to a precise, almost imperceptible seam in the wall, a detail only he would have noticed from his meticulous observations. His eyes, reflecting the orange glow of the flames, darted between the mural and a specific point on the floor, then made a series of rapid, intricate gestures, a silent, urgent language demanding their attention. His mind, now a whirlwind of architectural blueprints and spatial calculations, was no longer just observing. It was actively constructing a desperate route, connecting overlooked pathways, revealing a hidden possibility that lay beyond their limited perception. For a tense, agonizing moment, the trapped group remained frozen, their faces etched with a mix of fear and disbelief, torn between the overwhelming reality of the inferno and the boy's silent, insistent gestures. Chief Miller, defeated and out of options, finally, grudgingly, followed Ethan's gaze, his eyes narrowing as he tried to discern something, anything, in the seemingly blank wall. Dr. Chen, his scientific skepticism finally yielding to desperate pragmatism, watched Ethan's precise movements, a flicker of something akin to awe replacing his doubt. The roar of the fire intensified, a monstrous reminder of their rapidly dwindling time. Then, with a sudden, decisive nod, Nurse Davis, her voice ringing with renewed conviction, turned to the group. "He's found a way. We follow Ethan." The turning point was palpable. The quiet boy, once an ignored obstacle, was now their reluctant guide, his unique mind their only beacon in the heart of the fiery abyss, their last, desperate hope for survival. Olivia, with a protective fierceness that belied her usually gentle demeanor, began to create a small, desperate sanctuary around Ethan. She used her body to gently push back the encroaching, panicked few, carving out a meager circle of relative calm amidst the swirling chaos. The acrid smoke still clawed at their throats, and the heat radiated relentlessly from the advancing flames, but within this small improvised perimeter, the immediate overwhelming press of disoriented bodies lessened. This slight reduction in sensory overload, a subtle shift in the cacophony of screams and crackling fire, allowed Ethan's hyper-focused mind to begin to filter the noise. His vivid eyes, though still stinging from the smoke, narrowed slightly, no longer darting wildly, but settling into an intense, purposeful gaze that seemed to pierce through the gloom, accessing the detailed mental blueprints he held captive. His concentration, once threatened by the sheer pandemonium, now began to solidify, finding its anchor in the quiet space Olivia had created. Nurse Davis knelt, her hand still firmly clasped around Ethan's small one, a silent conduit of unwavering belief. "You've got this, mijo," she murmured, her voice low and steady, a phrase picked up from a previous patient, a comforting echo of a shared, quiet understanding that transcended the roaring inferno. She saw the subtle flicker in his eyes, the almost imperceptible nod of his head, a recognition that she, unlike Chief Miller, truly saw beyond his wheelchair, beyond his silence, to the brilliant mind within. This profound sense of being understood, a rare and precious gift for Ethan, grounded him amidst the spiraling terror. It was not just her words, but the firm, reassuring pressure of her hand, the unwavering confidence in her gaze, that quieted the rising tide of insecurity in his young heart, reinforcing the conviction that his unique way of seeing the world was not a burden but their only path forward. Chief Miller, a grim silhouette in the flickering orange light, watched their quiet exchange with a mixture of residual skepticism and dawning, desperate pragmatism. His face, streaked with soot and sweat, still held a hint of disbelief, but the failure of every conventional route had chipped away at his rigid adherence to protocol. Dr. Chen, coughing violently, stumbled closer, his initial scientific doubt now replaced by raw, visceral fear. He observed Ethan's unwavering composure, the boy's eyes reflecting the flames with an almost serene focus, a stark contrast to the widespread panic. The small cluster of trapped families, their faces pale and streaked with tears, shifted uneasily, their gazes flickering between the boy in the wheelchair and the advancing fire. A sliver of desperate hope, fragile and almost absurd, began to contend with their ingrained skepticism, a silent question forming in their minds. Could this quiet child truly be their only chance? Recognizing the limitations imposed by the choking smoke and oppressive darkness, Nurse Davis quickly improvised. She pulled a small battered flashlight from her pocket, a personal item kept for late-night rounds, and angled its beam onto a clear, grimy patch of floor near Ethan's wheel. "Show me, Ethan," she urged, her voice steady, providing him a makeshift canvas. He immediately responded, his finger, usually so precise in its silent pointing, now tracing rapid, intricate lines in the thin layer of dust and soot, sketching out invisible pathways and junctions. It was a language only Olivia truly understood, a series of quick, almost imperceptible strokes that depicted corridors, turns, and hidden doors. The faint beam of the flashlight, a small beacon in the oppressive gloom, illuminated his focused movements, a silent, urgent dialogue unfolding between the boy and the nurse, transforming the dusty floor into a dynamic, life-saving map. As Ethan continued to trace his intricate, silent map on the floor, Nurse Davis subtly adjusted his wheelchair, ensuring he had the clearest possible view of the area ahead, using her body to shield him from the stray debris that occasionally rained down. The flashlight beam danced, a small spotlight on his focused finger, highlighting the precise, deliberate movements that conveyed complex spatial information. He would point, then trace, then point again, his eyes darting between the improvised map and the wall he had indicated earlier. A continuous, rapid-fire communication. Chief Miller, though still skeptical, no longer actively interfered, his arms crossed, watching with a grim, bewildered intensity. Dr. Chen, now fully invested, leaned in, trying to decipher the boy's silent language, a growing sense of awe replacing his earlier doubt. The other trapped families, their desperation overriding their apprehension, huddled closer, their strained faces illuminated by the flickering flames, their collective fate now hanging on the precise movements of this quiet, extraordinary child. With a final decisive tap on the grimy floor, Ethan brought his finger to rest, his vivid eyes lifting from his improvised map to meet Olivia's gaze, a silent declaration that the route was clear in his mind. The air crackled with anticipation, thick with the smell of burning plastic and the oppressive heat. Nurse Davis nodded, a silent promise of action passing between them. She turned to the small, desperate group, her voice ringing with newfound authority that defied the chaos. "All right," she announced, her voice cutting through the roar of the fire. "Ethan has found a way. It's not an official route and it won't be easy, but it's our only chance. We stick together, we move fast, and we follow his directions. No questions, just action." A collective, trembling breath was drawn, a shared commitment to the terrifying unknown. The roar of the flames intensified, a monstrous prelude to their harrowing escape, as Ethan, now their unwavering compass, prepared to guide them into the heart of the inferno. With Olivia's resolute voice as their anchor, the small, desperate group moved, their eyes glued to Ethan's precise, unwavering finger. He pointed to the faded animal mural, then with a delicate tap indicated a specific, almost invisible seam in the wall, a detail utterly lost to anyone without his hyper-observational acuity. Olivia, her flashlight beam a shaky spotlight, quickly translated his silent language. "He says on this wall, there's a hidden service door behind the mural for maintenance access. It leads to the old supply corridor." Chief Miller, his face a grimace of disbelief, hesitated, but the roar of the fire behind them left no room for argument. With a grunt, he shoved aside the flimsy mural, revealing a narrow, grimy metal door, exactly as Ethan had indicated. A collective gasp of astonished relief rippled through the group, quickly stifled by hacking coughs as they peered into the dimly lit, dust-choked passage. The air, though still thick with smoke, felt marginally cooler, a testament to Ethan's extraordinary life-saving precision, a quiet triumph in the heart of the inferno. Miller, still muttering about blind luck, reluctantly took the lead, pushing the supply door open wider, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. The passage was dark, narrow, and filled with old medical equipment shrouded in dust, but it was a path, a tangible escape from the immediate threat of the waiting room inferno. Ethan, his wheelchair bumping over unseen debris, continued to guide them with a series of quick, decisive gestures, his eyes darting, his mind a relentless GPS. "Left here, then straight past the old linen carts," Olivia relayed, her voice echoing in the confined space. Their progress was slow, arduous, each step a battle against the smoke and the oppressive heat. Just as a fragile sense of hope began to bloom, the passage abruptly ended, not in a promised exit, but in a chaotic tangle of collapsed shelving units and discarded machinery, a new, daunting obstacle that effectively sealed their way forward. Miller's face tightened, a triumphant, "I told you so" glint in his smoke-filled eyes. A collective moan of despair rippled through the group as the new obstruction loomed, a seemingly impenetrable wall of twisted metal and splintered wood. Chief Miller, seizing the opportunity to reassert his authority, threw his hands up in frustrated exasperation. "See, this is what happens. Dead end. We're wasting time, nurse. We need a real plan," he barked, his voice raw with renewed skepticism. Panic, A subtle tremor just moments ago began to resurface. Olivia, however, remained steadfast. She knelt beside Ethan, whose brow was furrowed in intense concentration, his fingers rapidly tapping out a new sequence on his armrest. "Give him a moment, mijo," she urged, her voice calm despite the rising tension. Ethan's eyes, reflecting the dim glow of Olivia's flashlight, scanned the obstruction, then darted to the ceiling, before settling on a barely perceptible crack in the concrete floor. He pointed, then made a small circular motion, a silent instruction to look down, indicating a potential structural weakness. Following Ethan's subtle directive, Olivia shone her flashlight onto the floor, revealing a series of hairline cracks radiating from a rusted metal grate, partially hidden beneath a fallen medical supply box. "He says, there's an access panel here, beneath the grate. It leads to a lower service tunnel," she explained, her voice tinged with a growing wonder at Ethan's uncanny precision. Miller scoffed. "A service tunnel? Are you serious, nurse? We're not rats. That's too dangerous, probably filled with gas or water." His words, heavy with condescension, mirrored the renewed apprehension of the trapped families. He eyed a faint light filtering from above through a smoke vent and declared, "We go up. The roof is our best bet." His rigid adherence to what he perceived as logical, conventional routes, despite their proven failure, was a dangerous echo of his earlier prejudice, threatening to override Ethan's unique, life-saving insights once more. Ethan, sensing Miller's renewed resistance and the wavering confidence of the group, felt a familiar wave of frustration, a silent scream of unheard logic. He knew the roof route was a trap, a dead end he'd mentally catalogued during a prior visit, when a maintenance worker had shown him the faulty access ladder. His small hand, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he tapped out a more insistent rhythm on his armrest, his eyes pleading with Olivia to understand the gravity of his warning. Olivia, attuned to his every nuance, immediately grasped his distress. "Chief, no. Ethan says the roof access is compromised. There's a structural issue with the ladder. It won't hold everyone," she interjected, her voice sharp with urgency. Dr. Chen, who had been observing Ethan's almost frantic communication, now stepped forward, his skepticism finally giving way to a nascent trust. "He's been right about everything else," Chen stated, his voice quiet but firm, a surprising ally emerging in their darkest hour, lending his professional weight to Olivia's desperate plea to trust the boy. With Dr. Chen's unexpected support, a flicker of doubt crossed Miller's face, momentarily shaking his ingrained authority. He looked from Chen to Ethan, then to the hungry flames licking closer. The group, sensing the shift, held their breath. Olivia, seizing the moment, swiftly kicked aside the medical box, revealing the rusted grate more clearly. "We don't have time, Chief," she urged, her voice a whip. Miller, with a guttural sigh of defeat, finally capitulated, grabbing the grate, and, with a powerful wrench, tore it from its rusty moorings, revealing a dark, claustrophobic opening beneath. The air from below was cooler, cleaner, smelling faintly of damp earth and old concrete, a blessed relief from the acrid smoke. Ethan, his face streaked with soot, but eyes alight with triumph, pointed down, then gestured for them to proceed. They had found another way, a terrifying descent into the unknown, but a path nonetheless, a significant advance that promised temporary reprieve from the immediate inferno, though the looming threat of the hospital's deeper labyrinth still awaited them. The narrow service tunnel, a forgotten artery of the hospital's lower levels, was a claustrophobic nightmare of exposed pipes, dripping condensation, and the acrid metallic tang of aging infrastructure. The air, though marginally cooler than the inferno above, was still heavy with the distant, suffocating smell of burning plastic, a constant reminder of the encroaching danger. Ethan, his wheelchair bumping precariously over loose debris and uneven concrete, navigated the gloom with a silent, unwavering focus, his vivid eyes, reflecting Olivia's shaky flashlight beam, piercing the oppressive darkness. Every subtle vibration through the worn tires of his chair, every faint echo of a distant groan from the building, fed into the complex algorithms of his mind, constantly updating the intricate blueprint he held. Chief Miller, grumbling about rat tunnels and wasting time, trailed behind, his imposing frame barely fitting the narrow passage, his skepticism a palpable, oppressive weight. Just as a fragile sense of hope began to take root, their path was abruptly sealed by a colossal tangle of ruptured water pipes, twisted ventilation ducts, and a mountainous pile of fallen concrete, completely blocking the tunnel ahead. A collective groan of despair rippled through the small group, quickly stifled by hacking coughs as the air grew thick with dust. Miller, his face a mask of furious exasperation, slammed his hand against a pipe. "See? Dead end. I told you this was useless. We should have tried the roof, at least there's a chance up there." His voice, raw with renewed frustration, echoed the rising panic of the trapped families. Ethan, however, remained eerily calm, his brow furrowed in intense concentration, his eyes scanning the impossible obstruction, then darting to a seemingly insignificant rusted valve on a distant pipe. Ethan's small hand, precise and unwavering, rose, his finger pointing directly at the corroded valve, then tracing a complex, almost imperceptible pattern on the grimy floor. Olivia, her heart pounding, instantly understood the silent language. "He says," she announced, her voice strained but firm, "that valve, it controls a pressure release for the old incinerator chute. If we can open it, it might create a temporary vacuum, pull the debris down, and expose a lower access shaft beneath it. It's a very old system, barely used now, but it's the only way through this mess." Miller scoffed, his face incredulous. "Are you insane, nurse? A vacuum? This isn't a cartoon. That's pure fantasy. We're not blowing up the hospital to escape." Despite Miller's furious protests, Dr. Chen, his face streaked with soot but eyes alight with desperate resolve, stepped forward. "Chief, he's been right about everything else. We have no other options," he urged, grabbing a heavy wrench from a discarded maintenance cart. Olivia, without hesitation, pushed Ethan's wheelchair closer, shining her flashlight beam directly onto the rusted valve, a small beacon in the oppressive darkness. With a guttural grunt, Chen began to strain against the seized mechanism, his muscles bulging, the metal groaning in protest. The air grew thicker with the smell of burning plastic, and the distant roar of the fire intensified, a monstrous reminder of their rapidly dwindling time. Each agonizing turn of the wrench was a silent testament to their desperate, fragile hope, dependent entirely on a silent child's impossible knowledge. With a final, desperate heave, Dr. Chen's wrench slipped, sending a shower of sparks against the grimy pipe. The valve, however, had turned a crucial inch. A low rumbling groan echoed through the tunnel, deep beneath their feet, growing in intensity. Dust and small pieces of concrete rained down as the debris pile began to shift, slowly at first, then with a terrifying, grinding roar, collapsing inward. A rush of cooler, cleaner air, smelling faintly of damp earth and old concrete, blasted through the newly created void, momentarily clearing the smoke. A dark, narrow shaft, previously hidden beneath the rubble, was revealed, leading downwards into an even deeper, unseen part of the hospital's forgotten network. The sheer impossible precision of Ethan's direction was laid bare, an undeniable, miraculous truth. A collective gasp of astonished relief, quickly followed by choked sobs of gratitude, rippled through the small group. Chief Miller, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning shame, stared at the newly revealed shaft, then at Ethan, his eyes wide, speechless. His rigid worldview, built on protocols and dismissals, had shattered. The quiet boy in the wheelchair, whom he had so casually dismissed as an obstacle, had just saved them. Olivia, her eyes brimming with tears, squeezed Ethan's hand, a silent acknowledgement of his genius. The roaring inferno above still raged, but here, in the cool, damp air of the newly opened shaft, a profound, undeniable victory had been achieved, a testament to the extraordinary power of a mind that saw the world in a way no one else could. The newly revealed shaft plunged them into a deeper, colder darkness, the air smelling of damp earth and forgotten concrete, a stark contrast to the inferno above. Ethan, his wheelchair bumping and jostling precariously, navigated the descent with a quiet, unwavering focus, his vivid eyes reflecting Olivia's shaky flashlight beam, piercing the oppressive gloom. Every subtle vibration through the worn tires, every distant echo of the building's tormented groans, fed into the complex algorithms of his mind, constantly updating the intricate blueprint he held. Chief Miller, still grumbling about rat tunnels and muttering about wasted time, trailed behind, his imposing frame barely fitting the narrow passage, his skepticism a palpable, oppressive weight that seemed to cling to the damp air. Dr. Chen, however, had fallen silent, his gaze fixed on Ethan, a nascent trust replacing his earlier doubt, recognizing the boy's uncanny precision as their only hope amidst the suffocating darkness and the roar of distant flames. A faint, desperate cry, muffled by layers of concrete and steel, suddenly reached them from somewhere above and ahead, a chilling sound that pierced the relative silence of the tunnel. Ethan's head snapped up, his breath catching in his throat, his eyes widening with a sudden, terrifying realization. He knew that sound, that particular echo within the hospital's complex acoustics. It was the rooftop access, where pediatric patients and their caregivers were now trapped, surrounded by the advancing blaze, their last desperate cries a silent scream in his mind. His internal map, usually so calm and precise, now surged with a frantic urgency, overlaying the building's structure with the desperate faces of children. His small hand, now trembling with a mix of fear and an overwhelming sense of responsibility, tapped out a frantic, insistent rhythm on his armrest, his gaze fixed on Olivia, a silent, desperate plea for her to understand the critical, life-saving information he was trying to convey. Olivia, attuned to Ethan's every nuance, immediately grasped the profound urgency of his communication. Her heart leaped into her throat as she connected his frantic gestures with the distant, faint cries. "The roof! He knows a way to the roof!" she gasped, her voice raw with a newfound desperate resolve. She fumbled for Chief Miller's discarded, now-functional radio, a miracle amidst the chaos, and frantically pressed the transmit button. "This is Nurse Davis. To any unit on the roof, listen carefully. Ethan has a route. Look for the old maintenance duct near the northwest stairwell. There's a hidden emergency staircase behind it. Leads down to the old boiler room, then exits 7B. It's compromised, but it's your only way out. Move now." Her voice, strained and hoarse, became the shout echoing through the tunnel, a desperate lifeline flung into the inferno, a beacon of hope against the roaring flames. A terrifying guttural groan reverberated through the very foundations of the hospital, followed by a series of explosive cracks that shook the tunnel violently, sending dust and debris raining down. Above them, a monstrous roar erupted, a sound of pure destruction. As the roof, weakened by the relentless fire, finally gave way, the ground beneath their feet buckled, and a suffocating cloud of black smoke and pulverized concrete blasted through the shaft, threatening to overwhelm them. But through the choking haze, a faint collective cheer, distant and almost imperceptible, reached their ears, a confirmation that Olivia's relayed instructions had worked. The rooftop group, guided by Ethan's impossible precision, had escaped the fiery trap just moments before its devastating collapse, a narrow, miraculous window of salvation that defied all odds. The very air around them vibrated with the aftermath, a chilling testament to the scale of the disaster they had just narrowly averted. Emerging from the grimy service tunnel into the cool, damp air of the hospital's sub-basement, a wave of profound relief washed over the small group, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. They stumbled out, faces streaked with soot and tears, into a dimly lit, relatively untouched corridor, where a few overwhelmed EMTs and firefighters were already working, coughing in the lingering smoke. The news of the rooftop evacuation, relayed through frantic radio calls, spread like wildfire, transforming the chaotic scene into one of astonished, tearful reunion. Chief Miller, his imposing frame now slumped against a cold concrete wall, stared at Ethan, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning shame, his eyes wide and utterly speechless. His rigid worldview, built on protocols and dismissals, had shattered. The quiet boy in the wheelchair, whom he had so casually dismissed as an obstacle, had just saved over 200 lives, an undeniable, miraculous truth that rendered him completely silent, his prejudice laid bare for all to see. As the first wave of emergency responders rushed towards them, their weary faces turning to expressions of awe, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. Ethan, his small form exhausted but undeniably triumphant, found himself at the epicenter of a quiet revolution. Firefighters, their faces grimmed with soot, knelt beside his wheelchair, offering water and words of astonished gratitude. Dr. Chen, his medical bag forgotten, simply placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a silent gesture of profound respect. The hum of sirens outside, once a distant wail of despair, now swelled into a chorus of triumph. The immediate danger had passed, and in the aftermath of the inferno, amidst the smoke and the tears, the extraordinary story of the quiet boy who saw the world in a way no one else could began to unfold, setting the stage for a recognition that would forever change his life and the perception of countless others. The immediate aftermath of the rescue pulsed with a new kind of energy, one not of panic, but of profound awe. As the last of the rescued, their faces streaked with soot and tears, were led to safety, the quiet focus of the emergency responders shifted. Fire Chief Miller, his imposing frame still slumped against the cold concrete, watched as a line of his grim-faced firefighters, veterans of countless blazes, approached Ethan's wheelchair, their expressions softening into something akin to reverence. They didn't speak in commands, but in hushed, genuine words of gratitude, their soot-stained hands gently patting his shoulder. The whispers of "hero" began to circulate, first among the saved, then taken up by the arriving media, their cameras flashing, their microphones extended. Ethan, still processing the cacophony, felt the weight of their gaze, no longer dismissive, but heavy with a newfound, overwhelming respect, a tangible shift in the air around him. Within hours, the story of the memory map boy exploded beyond the confines of Unity General. News choppers whirred overhead, their relentless blades slicing through the Chicago skyline, while every major network ran continuous coverage, showcasing the harrowing escape and the miraculous precision of Ethan's guidance. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Chanik Ethan the Hero and Memory Map Miracle, transforming him from an overlooked patient into a national symbol of resilience and unconventional intelligence. His quiet dignity, even amidst the media circus, captivated a public hungry for stories of hope. Interviews with Nurse Olivia, her voice trembling with pride, painted a vivid picture of his unique abilities, while the hospital administration, facing intense scrutiny, issued a statement acknowledging his pivotal role, a public admission of a profound oversight that resonated deeply with communities nationwide. The recognition wasn't merely symbolic. Concrete opportunities soon materialized, transforming Ethan's future with astonishing speed. Universities renowned for their architectural and engineering programs extended unprecedented scholarship offers, recognizing his unique spatial genius as a talent to be nurtured, not just admired. Tech companies, intrigued by his eidetic memory, sent invitations for consultations and special projects, eager to understand the mechanisms of his mind. For Ethan, these invitations, delivered with an almost reverent deference, were overwhelming yet deeply affirming. He would quietly touch the embossed letters on the scholarship certificates, feeling the texture of the paper, a silent confirmation that his internal world, once dismissed as a private eccentricity, was now universally valued, opening pathways he had only dreamed of in his quiet observations. Unity General Hospital, now under intense public and internal scrutiny, underwent a profound and necessary transformation. Chief Miller, his rigid protocols exposed as dangerously flawed, was quietly transferred, his prejudice rendered obsolete by the undeniable facts of the rescue. In his place, a new head of security, committed to inclusivity, was appointed, and an immediate overhaul of evacuation systems began, directly integrating Ethan's detailed mental map of the hospital's hidden passages and structural nuances into revised blueprints. The hospital also announced the establishment of the Ethan's Insight program, dedicated to identifying and fostering unique talents in young patients with diverse abilities, ensuring that no potential genius would ever again be overlooked or dismissed due to physical limitations, a direct and lasting testament to his extraordinary impact. For Ethan, the whirlwind of public attention was a strange, often overwhelming experience. He remained largely the same quiet, observant boy, but now the gazes that met his were filled with genuine respect, not pity or impatience. He still preferred the familiar comfort of his Chicago Bears cap, pulling it low when the flashing cameras became too much, but a subtle shift had occurred within him, a quiet confidence, a deep-seated validation. Nurse Olivia, ever his steadfast advocate, watched him with a heart overflowing with pride. She would often find moments to share a knowing glance, a gentle squeeze of his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the "I told you so" unspoken between them. Her voice, when speaking of him, carried a new timbre, one of triumphant vindication, celebrating not just the hero but the brilliant mind she had always seen. Ethan's life, once defined by hospital visits and quiet observation, was irrevocably altered, blossoming into a landscape of boundless possibility. He was no longer merely a patient navigating a world built for others, but a respected consultant, an honored guest, a living testament to the power of a unique perspective. His story became a powerful catalyst, sparking conversations across the nation about the true meaning of ability and the hidden strengths within every individual. He continued to map the world, but now his internal blueprints were not just for his own navigation, they were a guide for society, proving that the most profound wisdom and salvation can emerge from the quietest corners, forever changing how the world perceived limitations and showcasing the boundless potential within the human spirit. Years later, the sterile hum of Unity General Hospital was a distant echo, replaced by the vibrant intellectual buzz of the University of Illinois at Chicago's esteemed architecture department. Ethan, now 17, navigated the sprawling campus with the same practiced ease he once displayed in hospital corridors, his advanced motorized wheelchair, a silent extension of his will, gliding over polished linoleum and worn brick pathways. His dark, disheveled hair was a little longer, but his vivid eyes, still absorbing every minute detail, now studied blueprints and digital models with an even deeper intensity. He was no longer just mapping existing structures, he was conceptualizing new ones, his eidetic memory allowing him to construct intricate designs in his mind with breathtaking speed. The scent of fresh ink and industrial adhesive from the design labs mingled with the faint aroma of campus coffee, a symphony of progress that fueled his boundless creativity, a stark contrast to the terror of the past. Beyond the hallowed halls of academia, Ethan's story had ignited a profound transformation within the city of Chicago itself. Public spaces from the bustling plazas of Pilsen to the quiet community parks in Little Village now featured enhanced accessibility, their ramps and tactile pathways a direct legacy of his ordeal. The Ethan's Insight program, established at Unity General, flourished, identifying and nurturing young minds with unique cognitive abilities, ensuring no child's potential was ever again overlooked due to physical or communicative differences. Vibrant murals commissioned by the city adorned walls across the South Side, depicting children of all abilities, their hands reaching for stars, a powerful visual testament to the community's newfound commitment to inclusivity. The air, once thick with the acrid smell of fear, now carried the sweet scent of blooming hope, a collective sigh of relief, and a promise of a more equitable future. This shift transcended mere infrastructure. It was a fundamental change in perception, a collective realization that true strength resided not in conventional prowess, but in the boundless diversity of the human mind. Ethan's silent bravery had shattered ingrained biases, demonstrating that the most profound wisdom often emerged from the quietest corners, from those society had traditionally marginalized. His memory map, once dismissed as a childish eccentricity, had become a powerful metaphor for seeing beyond the obvious, for understanding that every individual held a unique internal blueprint of the world, capable of unlocking unseen pathways. The city, once consumed by fear, now resonated with a deeper appreciation for empathy, resilience, and the quiet power of a different perspective, proving that unity truly blossomed when every voice, even a silent one, was heard and valued. On a warm Saturday afternoon, the vibrant sounds of a mariachi band drifted through the air of a bustling community park on the South Side, where a Fiesta de la Esperanza was being held in Ethan's honor, a testament to the resilient spirit of the local community, many of whom shared his heritage. The tantalizing aroma of sizzling carne asada mingled with the sweet scent of pan dulce, creating a festive atmosphere. Ethan, surrounded by his extended family, their faces beaming with pride, felt a profound sense of familia and solidaridad. Nurse Olivia, now a cherished family friend, knelt beside him, her eyes soft with affection. "Mira, mijo," she whispered, her voice warm. "You have shown them all what true strength looks like. Your spirit is a beacon." He smiled, the warmth of their embrace a tangible comfort, a quiet affirmation of belonging. Later that evening, as the last strains of music faded and the city lights began to twinkle, Ethan sat by his window in his meticulously organized apartment, the familiar rumble of the CTA-L train, a comforting baseline to his thoughts. His worn Chicago Bears cap rested beside him, a silent sentinel to countless hours of quiet observation. His mother, her hands calloused from years of loving labor, gently placed a cup of warm champorado beside him, its sweet, earthy aroma filling the air. She didn't speak, but her presence was a profound comfort, a silent understanding of the extraordinary journey they had shared. He closed his eyes, replaying the day's events, the faces of gratitude, the sounds of laughter, the feel of Olivia's hand. The world was still complex, but now he navigated it not just with his mind, but with the quiet, unwavering confidence of a hero. He opened his eyes, gazing out at the sprawling, illuminated Chicago skyline, a mosaic of steel and glass piercing the night. Each building, once a mere data point in his internal map, now seemed to pulse with life, a testament to human ingenuity. He imagined new structures rising, designed with empathy, built for every soul, a future where no one was an obstacle and every perspective held infinite value. The cool breeze carried the distant echo of sirens, a reminder of the trials faced, but also of the triumphs achieved. He reached for his cap, pulling it low, not as a shield, but as a crown. For in the quiet strength of his mind, Ethan had not only mapped the world, he had begun to rebuild it, one unseen pathway at a time, proving that the most profound wisdom often resides not in what we see, but in how we choose to look.